Welcome to the United We Scan podcast, the podcast by rural carriers for rural carriers. The views expressed in this podcast are of the presenters and the presenters only and do not represent the views, opinions, or strategies of the United States Postal Service or the National Rural Letter Carriers Association. We ask that you please consult your assigned union representative for guidance in your local area. Please like this podcast, share with your fellow rural carriers, and subscribe to be notified each time a new episode is uploaded. Please leave a comment or question for us below. Thank you. Now, here are the hosts of the United We Scan podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. New year, episode 105. New year, new resolutions. Bill is not with us this weekend. He and the wife are on their annual anniversary trip. I do believe he's in Punta Cana this week, so he should be joining us again next week. But so you're just kind of stuck with me and James tonight. How was your week, James?
It was about normal at the office. New postmaster starting to stretch his legs a little bit. He was a district DSS support specialist, and he loves talking about all the carriers that have been emergency placed in the district by the pods. And it's gotten to the point where I think we've got at least 100 to 150 carriers that have been EP'd in just the Detroit 1 district, at least from the numbers that he's given. On top of that, my route, it takes me a little while to get done. I get done just around evaluation, just a little over it most days. And he brought that up to me. And in our conversation, he went, "Oh, don't be nervous about it." And I looked at him, I went, "I'm not nervous. I do my job to the best of my ability, and I don't falsify any inputs because that's a felony." Putting him on notice that I know a little bit more than others on things. And so hopefully we'll see. But he is every day talking about how many people have been emergency placed, and his favorite line is, "And these people probably won't be working for the Postal Service anymore." So it's not just emergency placement. They're looking to terminate these people as they do this, apparently, at least in the Detroit district. But other than that, got to the weekend. I started working on my resolutions. And speaking of, we're going to be discussing that today because I did make a nice PowerPoint for my county meeting where I'll be doing the same presentation for them. So other than that, I do have a small announcement that we'll get to after you tell us how was your week, Kristen.
My week wasn't too bad. Kind of gotten used to having this day off in the middle of the week between Christmas, New Year's, and I took my daughter's night day off to go to her Christmas concert. So yeah, I ended up I had to work my K day yesterday, which was fine. A coworker of mine injured themselves New Year's Day and is out through the middle of the week, if not the rest of next week. So other than that, hasn't been too bad. It's been kind of light, my office, anyways. So it's kind of back to normal, and yeah, nothing really exciting here. I didn't make it to midnight on New Year's, if anybody's wondering. I ended up passing out in the chair in the living room. I woke up at 12:03, and Ruby was in the kitchen making a bowl of cereal. I think Eric was sitting out in the hot tub. And I walked out to Ruby and I said, "Well, it's 3 minutes after midnight. I guess I can go to bed now." I walked up and went to bed. That was my New Year's. Nothing exciting. So yeah.
That happens. That happens.
Hmm.
It's very rare for me to stay up past midnight most nights anyway, but I did for New Year's just to make it through. So, but just barely. Right after I went to bed too.
Yeah.
But yes, in the chat they were talking about how the concerned letter carriers did post about the emergency placement as well. Yes, they did.
Hmm.
But it's going all over the country.
Yes, it
So,
is.
but speaking of management, my announcement is I have been messaged by a carrier who told me that they PA District 1 labor representative that put out the Bailey's Bad Boy article has been reprimanded and demoted. Now, this is a rumor. This is a rumor. It has not been confirmed. The person's LinkedIn still shows them as the labor specialist with the weekly PA1 labor news articles. But that is the rumor that we have heard out of PA area, and I just wanted to put that out there that with as many people as have passed that along, they did do a little something for it. It's not enough in our opinion. I don't think it's enough in your opinion, Kristen, but it is at least something that they did. I have not checked Hero to see. It's just what somebody told me. I don't have access to that stuff personally. Haven't been on Hero myself to look, but I just wanted to put that out there. If anybody can confirm or not, feel free.
Okay.
But that's just what I was told. So take it with a grain of salt and do your own research.
Alrighty. So you want to get into this resolution stuff, James?
Well, it's a new year and everybody makes resolutions. So I thought, what better way to start the new year off than helping people learn how to do resolutions? And I basically created a Resolutions 101 PowerPoint for everybody to see here. And as you can see, it says Resolutions 101, how to craft a resolution for state and national conventions. So, what is a resolution? It's our way of recommending to change the language, create language, or do something to benefit the craft. It's telling our leadership at national what we want the union to do to make a difference for the rural carrier down on the ground. It could change the constitution of the union and how the union does things. And the major point of it is always wages, benefits, and working conditions. The three things that are most important to rural carriers. Now, what does a resolution look like? This is a copy of the Michigan Rural Letter Carriers Association resolution form. Now, I would contact your state secretary or your local unit for what your state has for the resolution form, because they may vary slightly from state to state. So make sure you get the right one for your state. Now, there's parts to this. Each part of this has a specific purpose and helps tell the resolution committee what the resolution's for, where it should be placed when it's presented to the delegation at the state and national convention. The top portion of it is pretty basic. You put the year first, 2025 for this year, and then you have to choose between binding versus non-binding. Binding means it's locked. The union can do this without any input from the Postal Service. And things like the Constitution at state of the state or national or your local. If you have a local constitution, you write a resolution to change the local constitution as well. You can also use it to change convention items. And when it's passed, it's a two-third majority vote to pass a binding resolution, which takes immediate effect as soon as it's passed. And then it will be updated in the Constitution or whatever document it belongs in as soon as printing happens for those. Non-binding, on the other hand, is for stuff we have to discuss with the Postal Service, whether it be negotiating in our next contract, changes to work rules, procedures, things of that nature where the Postal Service has to be involved in. And they are all advisory in nature. They're telling the union, we would like this, so can you do something to try and get this? Doesn't mean they will, but it's a possibility that they can try. And on the resolution form, you can check here for binding or check here for non-binding. And then beneath that on the Michigan resolution form are the different applications for it, whether it be vehicle stuff, your relief day work list, relief day items, benefits, salary, work rules, leave replacements, time standards, retirement, grievance procedures, EMA, automation, mail count, other, or your state or national constitution. The next section, what does the resolution cover? Add the appropriate document if one exists. You add the article number, section, paragraph as needed. For instance, I'm going to use the ELM Article 552, Section 15, Paragraph 1. Next down the page is where you describe your resolution. Whereas or present language. You can put present language in the slot if you have it, or you can give a somewhat vague description of what's going on. Or you could say there's no current language. Like this says, whereas the section of ELM needs a little more definition. Here is a example of the present language resolution. This is directly from the ELM, and I copied and pasted it here. Here's an example of whereas resolution, where you take a description of what you're thinking. Whereas current section does not protect carriers from having to carry out unsafe, illegal, or immoral acts as directed by management. The next section is the be it resolved or proposed language. The proposed language, you have to emphasize your change. So when you make a change to the current language, you need to bold the new language and strike through the language you wish to remove. That is the best way for them to see what the change is in the Constitution Committee or the Resolution Committee. Or you could also write a summary of what you want, such as needs protections for unethical, criminal, or safety violating orders. Here's an example of proposed language where I have added in bold the words, unless such order is unsafe, illegal, or immoral. So that way that is added into the language. Here's an example of it with just a be it resolved. Add a protection for carriers should the order be unsafe, illegal, or immoral. The last section that a carrier is going to do on this form is the intent of / reason for change. Exact same language for both. So this is your chance to tell the delegation at your local, county, or state convention why you want to make this change. Now, state conventions, you actually get the be it resolved and intent reason for change. National convention, you only get the proposed language or be it resolved. So you can make this part as detailed or as short as you want to tell your local county state what the reasoning is behind you making this. But at national, you can request that it be read and the body has to vote on it with a 2/3 vote because it's a suspension of the rules. And as with everything as with this, here's your example. Employees are sometimes given unsafe, illegal, or immoral orders from management. This provides a layer of protection, allowing denial of orders. And this is the exact same thing with the whereas section instead. So you can see it's the same on both. The last part of our resolution form is designed to be signed out by your county, local, or your county or local secretary in Michigan at least. And then this will be passed on to the state convention. Carriers do not touch this part. I just wanted to include it because it's actually on the page. Anybody have any questions? Kristen, got any questions or anything like that?
I'm good. I've written a few. I had one not this year, but last year go and pass it national. So
Like last year, I had my set that I took, and of course, a few of them got denied, a few of them passed at each level. So it's maybe difficult for some people, it may be easy for others. But if
and that's
anybody
the
has
one
any
thing
questions,
you have to remember when you write a resolution, especially for. I mean, I've seen some, that they'll get through the local and you move them on to state, and you like the basis of it, but you have to object to it because of the fact that it has to pertain to the craft as a whole. So, for instance, the resolution was about daylight savings time and the changing of start times to coincide. And I had to object to that because, number one, not all states go by daylight savings time. And number two, scheduling and start times can be easily done with a talk with management or go to a grievance if you need to for safety issues or a 1767 fill out. But you got to remember if you, especially if you're looking at something that's not a binding resolution for your state particularly, or going up any of the non-binding ones, especially you want to look towards for contract negotiations. You got to make sure it's something that is positive and gains for the whole entire craft and not just your specific office or state or region. Anything else, James?
no, not at all. But I do want to say that, this is one of the biggest things that we have to talk about is that no matter what happens, your resolutions are going to go in front of everybody and going to be presented to everybody. And if they vote it down, it's not a bad thing. Because take what they say from it and write a new one. I have a resolution that I made last year that did not pass, and I have a different version of it this year.
Yeah. I mean, you hear it, especially when you go to get one gone on state, national level, where you've got the for and against debates going on. I mean, that's where you can really take from, on something that, the basis is a great idea, but the wording's just not there. And you're going to hear this go back and forth to take those ideas to go back and then rewrite it for next year.
Exactly. And sometimes we write a resolution that may be really good, but at the time you present it, the caucus won't approve it because it's too wordy. I wrote
Yep.
a 3-page resolution and it got denied at National Convention because it was too wordy.
Hmm. Yep. I remember that.
I still appreciate our district rep stepping up and saying and actually presenting the argument for me on that one. I do appreciate that from her.
Yeah, she did. Though she did misspeak and call you an RCA. But I just kind of shook my
I
head.
was still pretty fresh as a regular at that point, so I mean I can't complain too much on that.
No, not at all. Yeah,
No,
mine
the
that I
other
wrote, not this year, but last year, 2023, about the nationwide bidding. That one went through with no objections at the gavel all the way through. I mean, it makes sense.
yeah, and I mean you're talking about um, plenty of resolutions actually pass that way.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Basically, when they go through the resolutions, now depending on what the Constitution or what some say, sometimes they'll just read the number, but the resolutions, not the Constitution changes. Those are done a little different. But you're expected to go and read these through, prior to the day that they start going through them, which is usually what, Thursday?
You have usually a day to read through them all.
A day and a half. I think we had a couple nights, but even then, we still, even after we've started the debate, we're back then again that next night, a bunch of us all going through them together again.
Hmm.
Right on up until, through Thursday night into Friday. So that's why you kind of want to know and whether you want to object, you take your notes and whatnot. That way, when it's time and they're just going through and they're just going to call them out by number. And that's when you got to be at the microphone because if you don't object right away, it's just the gavel comes down and it's passed automatically.
They're supposed to wait a, a small amount of time between
Hmm.
the reading and the time the gavel hits. Once the gavel hits, it's over. It's passed. Unless you suspend the rules to remove it from the gavel.
Yep. So that means you got to be up at that microphone waiting. As James knows, he's done it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I usually stand there and I wait a couple seconds because I'm usually going through it and I'm reading every resolution and I may object just because I want a clarification on the resolution because sometimes the wording may not be as understandable as you would like it to be. That too. Sometimes people object and they don't realize why they objected. Or they
Yep.
object and they forgot they objected and then now they gotta wait for them to get to the mic to talk about it.
Yep. Yeah,
You know.
it's a lengthy process. It definitely is. I mean, when you've got hundreds of resolutions to go through, it's I think it's the most time consuming thing o- other than elections can be time consuming though too.
Yeah.
But I think
Um
resolutions is the most time consuming
they
as well as the
take them many days.
constitutional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times they'll try to speed it up with the discussions and stuff like that. Like last year, they made it where only the objector and the maker or the state from which it came from could stand up and actually discuss the resolution after it was objected to, which actually really sped things up and limited the amount of debate that occurred to it. Because a lot of times now, the debate process is great. but you've got to listen to the people who have spoken before you, because a lot of people get up there and rehash the same things over and over. And while that is your right, you could say, I agree with a previous speaker on this part, and you can change that or things like that. You don't call them out by name. You don't do that stuff. That's against the rules. But you can take the time to actually present your argument to the convention floor, to the delegates. Yeah, 2 to 3 days to cover almost 400 ideas. But there are times where specific people go in there and their mission, as soon as the convention closes for the day and everybody gets the resolutions the first day, they are back up in their hotel room and they're going through every single resolution. And when they get done with that, they may find we'll just pass this entire block of resolutions, whether it's the RCA section or the uh, vehicle section, specific parts of it. Um, and so they'll step up and they'll actually request that specific block be passed in its entirety. And then we actually vote on that as a delegation as well.
Yep.
Because that also requires a suspension of the rules. Yes. It's with like 2 minutes per speaker and 8 minutes total, if I recall correctly.
I believe so. I'd have to look, but I don't have that right here.
Yeah. Um, I'm doing this from memory, so. And if you guys are having a actual healthy debate about it and people are actually engaged in the debate and you run out of time, you can always uh, make a motion to suspend the rules to extend the time by, say, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whichever, depending on how powerful the debate is. So I wanted to bring up a few of the resolutions that I'm bringing forward this year. I've only got a few so far. You'll indulge me.
Your local will appreciate you only having a few so far.
Well, I just started working on them on Saturday, so. But on top of the ELM one that I presented in the PowerPoint, I do have one that should the vice president be unable to serve and the president position becomes vacant, that the director of labor relations assume the role so that we continue continuity of office. Because the director of labor is already working with management as it is, wouldn't be as much of a translation. Um, the next one I actually took part of the NALC's Article 10 and added into Article 5, Section 7, where the National Board can suspend a national officer, that any member may file a charge for that. So that the membership can hold their national officers accountable.
I like that.
I still have some work to do on that to clean it up and make it look better. Um, in Article 6 of our Constitution, I am adding a Section 7 that the National Convention delegation shall be the supreme body to which all decisions shall be made, just like the NALC, because there is nothing in our Constitution that specifically states that the membership is the supreme body, and the delegation is the voice of the voice of that body.
Yes, Rich, you can use it in your state as well. The more people, the more states that can get it through up to national, the greater bearing it'll have.
Mm-hmm. Um, the next one is kind of kind of petty if you really want to go that way. I mean, I don't mind going to Grand Rapids for the national convention, but we've been going back to Grapevine, Orlando, Grand Rapids, and so on. Yes, and Spokane, Washington. And the only thing in our Constitution says that they have to alternate east and west of the Mississippi. So I want to put in that every effort must be made to utilize a different state in each half, rotating between the states that have facilities large enough to accommodate the national convention.
I like that too.
Because
I know they
I
did change it up with going to Indianapolis in 2026. No, 2027. Excuse me. 2026 is Grapevine.
yeah, and sure, and I already know what they're gonna do at national. The biggest thing they're gonna do is it's going to be an increased cost. They're gonna put some exorbitant number on it to get the delegation to vote it down. I already know how they're gonna do that. It's the same thing they did when I said that PTF should be halfway between RCAs and regular carriers on dues paying because they only get 2 days a week. And they shot that down because they put like what was it, 100 or $380,000 cost to the union for that, if I recall correctly.
Hey James, can you turn your screen share off?
Turn my screen share off.
Yes.
That better?
Yes. It was causing some issues with our recording person.
Sorry about that. Um, and then this one actually came out of my county, and I was asked to create it. And this one actually I get a lot of good feedback on as well. Do you know how we have MOU 10, where regular carriers can be demoted to RCAs?
Yes.
So this one is for MOU 10 to include the downgrade to a PTF. So that would be an option for regular carriers, and they wouldn't lose their career status becoming a PTF.
And that would open up the doors for PTFs to be able to transfer as well.
And them to transfer down to RCA if they wish to.
But I think they should be able to transfer as a PTF as well. PTF to PTF.
Yeah, that's another one we can make. That is good as well, Fender. Make that a resolution. Yeah, and didn't the one for national bidding pass
Yes, it
at
did.
national?
2023.
Yes.
Yeah. It passed
So
at the
we passed.
gavel.
Yeah, we passed it at the gavel that bidding for routes once it goes local, district, local more than 90 less than a year, district more than 90 less than a year, and then it goes nationwide before it goes to the public.
Yes.
But
And
it
but under the circumstances with it going nationwide, if this would help in the event of not being able to find a mutual transfer or having to use MLU 10 and going back down to an RCA, this would allow you an easier option if the opportunity is there to be able to move as a regular and I would update it to as a PTF as well. And so forth from there. So it would actually be a nationwide bid, but with the stipulations, it was extended days to start the route. I'd have to go back and look at it to remember what I changed the days for. But you would be responsible for all your own moving costs.
which is how it is normally. But and that would just be a benefit, especially in regions that aren't getting people in the door and nobody's hiring in. Somebody say from Michigan could move to North Dakota with a POV route, or they could move to Northwest Georgia or New Mexico, wherever there's an open route that goes to this national bid.
Yep. And that would be, in a national bid, though, obviously would still go by seniority, and anybody who's qualified to bid could bid on it.
Hmm. And so you're fighting with everybody in the nation on the bid.
Right, right.
Especially if it's a desirable location. But you also have to remember you're going into this office just like you would in a mutual transfer. You're going to be lowest seniority in that office. And so you would have to still bid all in that office in order to get the transfer.
No, because you're bidding on that particular route that's posted nationally. So you would automatically get that route. There wouldn't be a separate opening and bid in office.
Uh, I would
You
probably
would
think
come
that
in as the lowest seniority, office seniority, but there wouldn't be a separate bid in office. You're bidding on that route like you would in a district wide bid, that specific route.
hmm. And then um, Mr. Johnson says, I wish there was a
Exception.
ex exception for the 2040-2280 rule. If you don't have a sub assigned to your route for X amount of years, we will say 5, you should not be required to use all your leave. You shouldn't be required to use your leave if they're putting you into 2080, 2240 trouble.
Nope. They
And
can't
if they
force
are,
you to use your leave.
unless you're using high option, they can't force
Yes.
you to use leave. And yes, we know that a lot of areas are being affected by this major, and I will call it a severe winter weather storm. And it, somebody just posted a picture that all highways in Kansas are closed. Pretty
Wow.
much every road in Kansas is closed. If management is telling you to report to work, you can't. The roads are closed. It doesn't mean you can go in and ignore that the roads are closed. I saw a video out that way. Guy had a drone video. He was actually watching cars sliding around on the highways, on the back roads. He watched a salt truck slide into the ditch. The
Yep.
fact that the most dangerous part of this is if you are on these roads when they are closed like this and you have an accident, there is a possibility they will not come to help you because they can't get there. It's the same as when a hurricane happens.
Touch on the act of God. Yep. Let me pull it up real quick.
I was thinking too.
Do 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 do. Acts of God. Wow, there's a whole lot for that.
Yes, there is.
But we are gonna go to the PO 603 first, and it is the 142 something or another here.
Yep. That's just telling you for each day you service and report to the post office and are scheduled for perform delivery for EMA.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Okay, Article 30.1 in the contract.
30.1H.
Yes.
Yep.
When acts of God prevent an employee from performing the employee's duty, the employer may authorize administrative leave. Equipment maintenance allowance will be paid for each service day a rural carrier reports to the post office and is scheduled to perform delivery. If the carrier fails to serve all or any portion of the route due to the lack of proper endeavor or any failure for which the carrier is responsible, appropriate deductions from salary and EMA allowance will be based on the miles omitted.
Now, management will beat you with that a little bit because if you go out and try and service your route and you don't get through the whole route because it's too dangerous, they'll say, "Oh, you're going to have to take leave, or you're not getting paid for that today. Take leave." No, if you made a an effort to get that mail out there, like I know on my route there are some roads I cannot go down when it's slippery out because I'll end up in a ditch, I'll end up sliding back down a hill, or in one instance, I'll end up in a lake if I go down that road. And it is not without doing effort to get out there, but for instance, Kansas right now, where all the roads are closed, you could try to make an effort to get in there, but you might get arrested. You know,
Right?
that's the biggest thing. And your safety is more important than that mail or that package. That mail and package can wait a day. Hell, it's already waited long enough through the entire system as it is with as many delays that are going on right now. So it's not like it's going to hurt anything to wait another day to get it there safely. And as it said, an act of God that prevents you from performing your duty. Well, I would say not being able to get any traction on the roads because they're all a sheet of ice would be an act of God that prevents you from doing your duty.
Hmm. I agree.
Now, now I do hope personally that these district managers and local managers have turned around and said, you know what? We're going to keep them home because it's safer that way, and we'll let them deal with it when the roads are clear so they can get to work. At least the main roads are cleared.
Let me touch what the ELM says real quick on the act of gods. This is 519.21. Act of gods involve community disasters such as fire, flood, or storms. The disaster situation must be general rather than personal in scope and impact. It must prevent groups of employees from working or reporting to work. And then the 212. The following provisions concern administrative leave for acts of God. A. Postmasters and other installation heads have authority to approve administrative leave for up to 1 day. District managers and postal career executive services. Plant managers may authorize administrative leave beyond 1 day, but not to exceed a total of 3 days for their installation and those reporting to it. District managers and senior or lead plant managers may approve administrative leave for periods up to in excess of 3 days for their installation and those reporting to it. Postmasters and other appropriate postal officials determine whether absences from duty allegedly due to acts of God were in fact due to such cause, or whether employee or employees in question could, within reasonable diligence, have reported for duty. And then early dismissal for acts of God. So when they're pulling you off the street early. When an employees are dismissed from duty before normal completion of their duty due to an act of God, the following applies. A. Full-time employees are entitled to credit for hours worked plus enough administrative leave to complete their tour of duty. This combination of work and leave is not to exceed 8 hours in any one day. Part-time regular employees are entitled to credit hours worked plus enough administrative leave to complete their scheduled hours of the day. This combination of work and leave is not to exceed 8 hours in any one day. Basically, you're going to get paid your evaluation, regardless. That pertains more to city when it comes to using the administrative leave to complete their
Yeah,
8-hour day.
and our
For
leave
us, it
shows up.
would be our evaluation.
Our leave shows up as 8 hours, but we get paid our evaluation.
Yep.
Um, do you want to keep going with the
Just I got a couple more spots of this real quick because it's
Yeah,
part-time flexible employees are entitled to credit for hours worked plus enough administrative leave to complete their scheduled tour. The combination of straight time worked and an administrative leave may not exceed 8 hours in a service day. If there's a question as to scheduled work hours, the part-time flexible employee is entitled to the greater of the following: the number of hours the part-time flexible worked on the same service day and previous service week, number of hours the part-time flex was scheduled to work, or the guarantee hours is provided in the applicable national agreement. Employees prevented from reporting. So, for those of you that can't get there, employees scheduled to report who are prevented from reporting or who, after reporting, are prevented from working by an act of God may be excused as follows. A. Full-time and part-time regular employees receive administrative leave to cover their scheduled tour to duty not to exceed 8 hours. Part-time flexible employee receive administrative leave subject to the 8 hour limitation for their scheduled work hours and with 519.214C, which are really, and then let me cover with the RCAs. There's 519217 specifically says substitute rural carriers and rural carrier associates. Substitute rural carriers and RCAs in a leave earning status are treated the same as regulars. So designation 74 and 79, you're treated the same as a regular. If they're scheduled for duty and are unable to report to the postal installation, admin leave is granted for the full day that the employees are scheduled to serve their routes. No equipment maintenance allowance is paid, so you would not get EMA if you're on a POV route that day. If employees are scheduled for duty and report to the postal installation but are unable to serve all or part of their routes through no fault of their own, they may be granted admin leave for the remainder of the normal tour of duty for that day. Payment for equipment maintenance allowance is made if appropriate because employees are considered to be in duty status. There you go. Act of God from the ELM. Anything you want to add, James?
Yeah. Um, so like she said on there, you're going through and it's got to be affecting more than just one person. It's got to be affecting a group of people. Um, for instance, I found there is a class action grievance that was filed that was settled, and 3 out of 32 employees failed to report to work due to flooding. And so they denied the grievance because those 3 carriers actually lived among those who did report to work. So it's got to affect more than just a select few, and it's got to be reasonable. Now, take that flooding for instance. If, say, your area was cut off from everybody else due to flooding, and there were you and like 4 other rural carriers there, and they could prove that nobody was coming out of this area, then it would be determined an act of God. Like it took out the only bridge to get to work. That's an act of God. But just because there's flooding doesn't make it an act of God unless you can't physically get to work. And that's the biggest argument a lot of management has. Look at what happened with the hurricanes. They were still telling people to report to work when the hurricane was offshore. The winds were already blowing on the mainland, and they should have kept the carriers home. They should have let it sit, protected their employees, but instead they're like, "Oh, just try and make an attempt. If you can't make it, just bring the mail back." Well, unfortunately, we lost a few pieces of equipment that way, and many injuries of employees.
Yeah, it's crazy what they want us to try and work through sometimes.
And some of
I
us have too much pride not to do that.
Yeah, I remember nasty snowstorm back in April of 2018, and we got dumped with over 18 inches that night. And I was the first one out to my route, and I was the first one back. Because once I cleared the industrial park, I was pushing snow with my bumper and it was still coming down, and I said, "Nope, not doing this." And when I got back, nobody else had left yet. Few people went out. Most everybody came back. One was still trying to power through it. I have no clue why. But we had one RCA that couldn't even make it into that office that day. I still ended up putting a full day in because once I got back and recased everything I had and had to scan all the packages, the one route that nobody could make it in, we had to all go case that up and scan all those packages and just helping everybody out get their stuff recased up before we all left. So yeah, I still ended up putting an 8-hour day in that day. It was crazy.
Hmm.
And I think it took us about 2 weeks to finally catch up from that snowstorm.
Yeah, as somebody just said, just remember, if you end up dying over something you shouldn't be doing in the first place,
Mhm.
management's just going to come and get the mail and make others deliver it
Yep.
because you're just a number to management.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't get the snow where I'm at now, but we get ice. And I remember the one day they sent us out there during an ice storm, and it was just, and I was running a route north of town that was getting hit harder, and the other zip code, we were the two other zip codes, and I mean, when you're only doing 5 miles an hour and hoping you don't slide past that box as you're trying to stop at it, only driving 5 miles an hour up the road because you can't drive any faster, and your wipers are icing up, your mirrors have iced up completely. That's unsafe. And we did. We called it, and I remember calling back to the office and telling her there is no way I can safely do this. And her just flat out accusing us of, well, you guys are talking to each other, blah blah blah. And we're like, no, we're making safety calls. You're not the one out here. We are. Well, you can't. You have to scan all those packages off property. That's fine. I was parked at the RMPO office for the route I was carrying, and that's where I scanned all those packages. In the back of the LLV, as I just listened to the ice pelting the LLV the whole time, freezing my butt off, and drove. It took me probably an hour to drive the 10 miles back to the office. It was that bad out. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, management will give you resistance. I had it again on my POV route on the west end. I'm like, I am pushing snow with my bumper. I've already been stuck twice. I'm not doing this anymore. And she wanted to give me a hard time. And I said, no, I am calling it. And it literally took me 45 minutes to drive not even 20 miles. And that was just getting out of town. I still had another 15 miles or 12 miles to get back to the office. So, you have to know, and you have the right, and if they want to retaliate or discipline you for making that safety call, that's a grievance we'll win all day long because the
hmm
safety is our priority. So don't be afraid to stand your ground, even if that means filling out that 1767 safety form when you get back to the office from calling it for the day to cover your behind. I mean, that's what you got to do.
And as you said, don't scan them at the office. Management's going to push that all the time. I'm sorry, the office was the safest place for me to stop and scan all these packages.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that's what you have to do. And they're only integrity scans because management has no integrity. And the reason why they do that is because management was scanning packages while carriers were on the street, and so the carriers get punished for management's misactions.
Yep.
And I remember a couple years ago, I was doing my route and I was sliding everywhere. And my route is the furthest corner of the township in my area. And none of my roads get plowed for 2 or 3, 4 days. And I was going along and I was just sliding past every box, no matter how slow I was going. And at one point, I just stopped. And when I went to take off, I slid sideways right up against the mailbox. and I had to wait an hour and a half for a tow truck to get me off that mailbox. And at that point, I'm like, I'm going home because I was sliding everywhere. They weren't going to plow my streets. Like, I'll do it tomorrow. And that's what you've got to do. You know, everybody else may have driven their whole route and gotten it done. But once I was stuck for an hour and a half and I'd been sliding everywhere, the nerves got frazzled. And it's like, you know what? Take a break, come back at it tomorrow.
Yeah. When it's not safe, it's not safe. Plain and simple. And that's your call out on the street.
Safety is your call.
Anything else, James?
Not really.
All
Missing
right.
Bill.
I know. I am. I'm trying to help hold it down with you here. But yeah, no, I am missing Bill, but I'm sure he's enjoying the Caribbean. No, I would be.
I know I would be too. You know, and he deserves it after all the stuff he's been through.
Yes. Yeah, I was looking at things to do in Italy for that trip I'm planning, so yeah. But other than
I've already got my plan for SAC down. Um,
that's
I
good.
plan on visiting a few things down there in Atlanta while I'm there, and spending time with people I know. So I'm looking really forward to it. It's going to be a long drive though. I mean,
Yes, it
12
is.
hours, 12
Yep.
hours down there. But got the hotel room and everything set up. I've gotten people that have helped me out with finances for that, so I don't have to worry about my finances anymore on that.
That's good.
So I'm quite happy with that. But I look forward to seeing everybody at SAC. So come on down and join. I know that I'm going to end up paying the extra $40 for being not part of SAC, but I think it's going to be worth it in the
Yeah.
long run.
Yeah. Well, that'll be good. Yeah, it'd be good to see you at Mid States. Unfortunately, I'm not going to make Eastern States, so
I'm going to try to make them all. I'm going to try.
I wish you the best on that. Yeah,
The only one I might not make is Western because
yeah,
that one is 2 days away, and I don't know if I feel like that's a good drive or not. And I don't fly, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, that's Mid States is the only one I'm gonna make, obviously, with everything else I got going on this year. So much as I wanted to go to the others, I my arm got twisted a little too loosely, and well, she didn't have to twist it at all when she says, "Hey, you want to go to Italy?" Yes. So
I mean, if somebody's offering, yeah, go for it.
yes,
So, all right. My final thoughts for the night.
yes, James, go ahead.
Your resolutions are either a wish list or a command to the union, whether it's a command through binding or a wish list through non-binding. And it doesn't matter whether it passes or fails. The most important part is that you try. You try and help make this union better. Because the only way that National and everybody else in the delegation knows what the craft is doing is either being on the floor working the routes or getting these resolutions at convention. But don't think it's a major problem if your resolution gets shot down the first time around. I've had plenty of mine shot down. Remember to keep yourself safe this week. I know that it's going to be a heck of a cleanup for a lot of these states. I do believe several of our salt agencies, our plow agencies, have gone down to that area to try and help out, just as a precaution. So if you can't make it to work, don't go. Tell them you cannot drive in these conditions because it is unsafe. We've got a long way to go before we get to national convention, but we are making progress. There's a reason they sent these pods out. And it's because people are fighting. People are standing up for their rights. And when we stand up, we show management we're all in this together. Kristen?
Thank you, James. Yes, definitely. Safety, number one, is first for you. You make that call. You can't safely get to work. Don't go. Plain and simple. I wouldn't risk my life going, and I'm literally around the corner, so I wouldn't risk it. But on that note, guys, those that are affected by the storm, please stay safe, be smart about it, and everybody else, of course, have an awesome week. I do believe Thursday is the day of observation. Am I correct, James? The ninth?
Yes, the ninth.
Okay.
We get the day off,
Yes.
supposedly.
Yeah. Hasn't been announced in my office yet. But yeah, definitely remember that. We did go over that those procedures in the last episode, 104. So go back to that if you have to. But other than that, guys, stay safe this week. Bill will be back with us next week, and we'll be back as usual. So have a stay safe week, everybody.